Everybody, welcome. There's a lot going on in the world right now with Iran and Epstein files and the economy. But I want to bring your attention back to something that I think is very important. And let's do a little background on this. In November, a federal judge dismissed the DOJ indictments against James Comey and Letitia James, whom Donald Trump considered his political enemies. In twin rulings, the judge found the appointment of Lindsay Halligan, who was an insurance lawyer and had no prosecutor experience, as interim U.S. attorney was invalid and unlawful. Halligan was picked by President Trump to bring criminal charges against his political foes when a predecessor denied or refused to do that. So a group called the Campaign for Accountability filed complaints in November. And what they did was they asked the bar in Florida and Virginia to probe misconduct that they argued spanned bringing charges not supported by probable cause, as well as speaking about the case with a reporter. The Virginia State Bar declined to initiate an ethics investigation, while Florida seemingly, at least at first, seemed to be on the path where they were going to do an investigation, even responding to the Campaign for Accountability by saying there was a pending investigation. That was in February. However, on March 7th, they then said there was no such investigation. The next day, DOJ Attorney General Pam Bondi said or posted a notice online in the Federal Register proposing a new regulation that would let it intervene in state bars' disciplinary investigations, including with the authority to review any allegations against DOJ's lawyers first. So if this sounds like overreach and a little bit of corruption, I agree with you. And to talk about that today, we have the executive director for the Campaign of Accountability, Michelle Kuppersmith. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So this is one of those things that gets lost in the sauce, if you will, with everything going on in the 2-hour news cycle. But it sure seems like something that if it were to proceed and this new regulation that she's proposing were to take place, it sure does seem that it would limit accountability for a number of DOJ lawyers, as well as increase the risk to people in DOJ's legal crosshairs. What's your take on it?
Well, while we don't really think that there's a formal role for DOJ to interfere in a state bar investigation, obviously we've seen several times that the Trump administration has found creative ways to impede the actions of private entities. I'm thinking about the law firms with the deals. I'm thinking about the universities and what they've been going through. So we don't really know. Is this a threat? Is this an empty threat? Is this something that they might, try to, sorry, I should say DOJ, Pam Bondi, tries to threaten these state bar lawyers, because most of it, it's staffed by human beings. These aren't just bars, right? They're humans that are part of this. Like, what could they do to those people to try to get them to not do investigations? And, it's possible that we saw that play out last week for the first time because we don't know this, but the Florida bar's 180 was quite abrupt, right? So as soon as we made it public, I think that was about 4 p.m. on Thursday. By like between 10 and 11 a.m. on Friday, the bar was emailing reporters with a statement saying that the letter that it had sent to us was erroneous. So what happened between 4 p.m. Thursday and 11 a.m. Friday, I'm not sure. But, it could have been the first sort of, shot across the bow.
So where does something like that go from here? Where obviously it was a very quick turnaround. Somebody saw it on the news and immediately, made a call to some people down in the Florida State Bar and said that that's the wrong choice. Do better. Where does it go from there? Like they can choose to do that at this point, but is this something that you know would it go to a another level of legal jurisdiction to discuss that? Can the states just suddenly decide not to do ethics probes?
Well, you bring up a really interesting conundrum here, which is that bars, which regulate lawyers, are actually generally private entities. And so that's kind of different from most professions. If you're a nurse, if you're an esthetician, if you're a, exterminator, you're regulated by the state. But interestingly enough, lawyers are one of the few professions that go through, a private sort of ethics body in the bars. And so, they do have ultimate discretion, these bars, and what kind of investigations they choose to go forth with. And, unfortunately, they're not subject to public records rules, although we are going to be sending public records requests to the Florida AG who tweeted about this and to DOJ, just to see if it was any record of interference between those entities and the Florida bar. So unfortunately, I don't know exactly what happened. I might not never know, but we're gonna try
Right.
to do everything that we can and use our toolbox to try to figure that out. But yes, unfortunately, the Florida bar could just say we're done, and we'll never really know why or what happened potentially.
So this could essentially become a state thing where, depending on the state and if it's, Republican led or not, they could just decide that we're not going to do ethics probes into DOJ lawyers. Does it extend to any lawyer or is it basically DOJ's lawyers?
Well, so what we've seen is that there have been bars willing to go after sort of post-Trump lawyers until yesterday, actually, when Ed Martin, it was revealed that he is under investigation by the DC bar, which I'll get to that about the DC bar. But, for example, I'll go to Rudy Giuliani, right? He was, I think, at one point an official, I guess the walls are porous, but, I think we could say that he was sort of an official Trump attorney. But after the end of the Trump one era, the New York bar did go after him and, in fact, disbarred him.
Yep.
And so, I think Ed Martin is maybe the first sitting DOJ attorney that a bar has gone after. We thought perhaps that the Florida bar was willing to go after Lindsay Halligan subsequent to her resigning her position, right? So this is someone that under their time as a, appointee, they were not pursued for an investigation, but subsequent to them leaving that role, the bar then felt, a little bit more comfortable going after it. Now, I don't know if that's actually true given the 180, but that was a supposition that we had. So I think like my understanding from the proposed rule, which has not gone through yet, the Pam Bondi rule, the suppression rule, I'm calling it, is that it would only apply to DOJ lawyers. But who knows, right? Like the name of the game here is chaos and twists and turns. So maybe they extend that to White House lawyers or agency lawyers. I mean, there's
Sure.
many, many lawyers that are staffed in the federal, apparatus. So stands to be seen,
Yeah. This could very easily be like a probe to see what they can get away with before they expand, which they seem to like to do. Um,
like a trial balloon type of thing. And
Like a trial balloon, absolutely. What can we get away with? And, from what I've read, it doesn't appear that there's a lot of legal basis for the policy to stand on. So again, it gets into that, bluster phase where we're gonna say a lot, but we can't really back it up. But again, to go back to our earlier point, I guess it really depends because it's a private kind of institution, you know, what is the composition of the bar in that state? Are they willing to just do whatever Trump and his DOJ want, or are they willing to do what is right and just? So maybe it becomes something of a guidance thing for states, and depending on where the DOJ lawyers are operating at the time, and maybe you can get away with things in a Republican state where you couldn't get away with it in a blue state that likes to adhere to the concept of justice.
yeah, I mean, as I mentioned before about the DC bar going after Ed Martin, the DC bar has actually, we filed a complaint against Bill Barr about 2 years ago now for actions that he took in the course of being Rupert Murdoch's lawyer. If you followed the trust sort of saga there, and the DC bar was one of the only bars that reached out to us asking for additional information. Now, unfortunately, they needed, sort of sealed court records that no one could provide for them, but they were the only like, one of the few that reached out to us to say, like, "We're actually trying to initiate an investigation here." So, it's like it's a good note for us, right? Like, that, the DC bar is one of the few that seems willing to take action.
What happened with Virginia? It seems like they very quickly just said, we're not going to do anything about it and we're going to let the courts decide that.
Yeah, well, it's actually a good question because we only got a letter from Virginia from our first, round of complaints in November. And that's actually, as you alluded to, their response about we're gonna like leave this to the courts and see what they decide to do. So that's actually why we sent the second letter, was because of the whole kerfuffle around Judge Novak, who's actually a Trump appointee, and him asking Lindsay Halligan in January to prove effectively that she is actually the interim U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, because as you mentioned that there have been twin rulings saying that she was not appointed properly.
Right.
And so she wrote back an incredibly rude, angry, response that was entered into Judge Novak's docket for a totally unrelated case to the Comey and James situation. And only after that did he say, if you continue to hold yourself out as a U.S. attorney, I will refer you for sanctions. And that's when she resigned. And so we felt that it was our duty to put that, into a letter to the Virginia bar to say, hey, you know, your last correspondence with us was we're looking to the courts. Well, you know, they came short of sanctions or, referral for disciplinary actions, but this is pretty, strong. Like perhaps this might prompt you to do something. And so funny enough, that's when we got the Florida response and no response from Virginia still. So, you know, there's a possibility that something's going on there. I just, unfortunately don't know at the moment.
What would be the next step in this? Right now, it seems she's going to get away with, improperly presenting herself as as an attorney, when her entire background comes from being an insurance lawyer, who I believe helped Trump in 22 with the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case, and obviously you made her way into his orbit, which then apparently allows you to become a DOJ attorney for wherever he decides to throw you. Um, what could be next for her, or is it something where the farther this goes and the more the resistance there is from the DOJ, you worry like there's just going to be no accountability?
Well, I always worry that there won't be accountability. I
I
can
think we all do. Yeah.
My hope is that the Florida bar keeps a file open, right? Perhaps there's some sort of sea change and that the right thing is done and that, there is an investigation that is ongoing. I mean, I think it's common, or sort of common procedure in Florida to sort of have a file open on a lawyer who has an ongoing court situation going on, and so, Lindsay Halligan certainly falls into that, and I think the job for all of us is to keep an eye out. What is she doing, right? Because it's important that, these lawyers abide by the ethics rules that they themselves attested to. Even if she stays in the private sector or, who knows, she might pop up somewhere else in Trump world in the future. It's incumbent upon, my organization and others to report whatever they see if she continues this type of behavior.
Yeah, I think it's always good to have eyes on these people because they do seem to pop up, in various places and spaces,
Yes, I have
down the
many
road,
Google
like,
alerts for many Trump associates. You never know where they might end up.
you never know, like, the names just kinda pop up down the road. Who is it? Habiba? Uh, with
Alina
the,
Habba,
was it Hababa?
Alina Habba, US.
Alina Habba.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah, one of my
right.
favorites. We filed a bar complaint against her as well.
Yeah, because she also had to leave her position as well, right? Like, she
Correct.
resigned from that. Yeah.
Yes, for the same reason that she was ruled, ineligible effectively. Same with John Sarcone in the Northern District of New York, who was also trying to prosecute, Letitia James. We filed bar complaints against both of them.
Do you think, eh do you think this is anything that would give them pause, the Trump administration and his DOJ, to maybe not be as upfront with going after their political foes? Like, it seems like they tested the waters, and it didn't really go in their, favor. The whole thing about indicting a ham sandwich, like they just, threw people's names out there and said you're indicted, but it never really seemed to work out. Do you do you think this will give them pause for the future, or is it just kind of a momentary, respite before they do it again?
Well, I think that they're going to keep trying to throw spaghetti at the wall, but it does seem like the federal judiciary is doing the right thing here. Like they've become a bulwark, in terms of keeping the rule of law functioning.
Absolutely.
And, I really commend the federal judges who have done this in the face of like great danger to themselves, like, Judge Boasberg. Um, so listen, like there's a reason that these job descriptions for U.S. attorneys have a lot of requirements because it's a difficult and complicated job. And I don't think you're going to find a lot of people who are eligible for that who are willing to do these, sort of politically motivated investigations. Of course, like John Sarcone that I mentioned in the Northern District of New York. I mean, he was like a town lawyer, hung his shingle out in Croton on Hudson in New York, and then he somehow finds himself the the U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of New York. These are not people that would in any world have been appointed to these jobs in the past, and so they keep failing because they're really bad at it. And anything happened in Eastern District of Virginia, the first person was like, "No, I'm not doing this," and that's how they found Lindsay Halligan. So they might keep throwing spaghetti at the wall, but kudos to the federal judiciary for keeping things tight.
Yeah, and this seems like a consequence of what they've been trying to do. I believe have been a number of DOJ lawyers who have resigned and left the agency because of, what this administration has tried to do in the past, right?
Yeah, I mean, I live in New York City. The Southern District of New York has basically been gutted because of
Yep.
what was happening there. And recently in Minneapolis, there were, I think, 7 or 8 lawyers who resigned because they were unwilling to take, orders from above. So there are many lawyers out there who are willing to do the right thing. So that's, part of our goal here is to keep those standards for all lawyers.
Now, I know the campaign for accountability is obviously focused on this, but you do other things as well, right? Like you're focused on other issues as well. Can you share with us some of the other things that you're looking into?
Yeah, of course. So a big thing we've been doing, as you mentioned, is bar complaints against Trump administration officials. But we also do corporate accountability. Right now, we're looking into online gambling, which has become an epidemic, especially among young men. And as we look to how do we re-engage a whole generation of people that feel disaffected from an economic standpoint, especially from a political standpoint, also one of the things that we think is really undergirding that is this proliferation of online gambling. So we're doing reports on that, trying because sort of what our a lot of what we think about our work is pushing policymakers to do the right thing, whether that's oversight bodies or state legislators to pass the right kinds of laws. We're not policy folks, but we want to provide a body of evidence to whoever is the right, bastion for that to then do the right thing. And so that's where our online gambling work fits in. We also have been drawing a lot of attention to your viewers and listeners might know about crisis pregnancy centers, which actually outnumber reproductive health clinics in this country. I mentioned I live in New York City, and it's something like 10 to 1. It's crazy how many of these sort of fake clinics there are. And so we've been going around and looking at all their websites, and it seems like a lot of them make false claims. And there's been trouble in the past trying to go after these places because of First Amendment issues. We're allowed to lie in this country. Um, but we are looking at things that are actually would be considered deceptive to consumers. So for example, lying about being HIPAA regulated, lying about being able to diagnose a viable pregnancy. And we've actually gotten a lot of these crisis pregnancy centers to sort of clean up their websites, which you know, goes to trying to make it seem less attractive to people who, when they Google, I need an abortion, this is the first thing that pops up. But if they go to the website and it's like, huh, this doesn't seem right, maybe they move on. So it's incremental victories here, but we have a wide array of accountability, topics that we work on, and we sort of go where we're needed.
Can you pull that apart for us a little bit more? And because that is an issue that I don't think I was aware of with
Mhm.
everything going on, and I want it to be something that my community is aware of. You said that there was kind of a surge in those establishments. Can you just give us a little bit more background?
Sure, of course. So crisis pregnancy centers have been around for a long time, and you might sort of think of them if you see the billboards on the highway that say, like, a woman holding a baby or they're pregnant or something, say, like, in crisis, need help, call this 1-800 number. And you might think of them as kind of like, a granny in town with like a cute little place with a lot of knit stuff around, and they help you, they counsel you, right? But their intent really is to draw you in places where there is not enough reproductive health, which is like basically the whole country at this point, right?
Right. Right.
To draw you in, they'll offer you a free ultrasound. They'll give you, free diapers. They'll give you credits for formula. But really, their intent is to keep you from having an abortion. Most of them do not provide actual medical care. But you'll walk in there and it sort of seems like there's medical care available. They do the ultrasounds, which feels like medical care, but really, they're trying to get you to the point past where you'd be eligible for an abortion, especially in the wake of the Dobbs decision. They have just, flooded the zone in states where there basically is no reproductive health care. Right. So we've been for years now trying to hold these centers accountable, many of whom get actually taxpayer money through both federal grants and also state taxpayer money. And so we've gone after them for that as well when there's misspending, like executives of organizations making $500,000 a year, when women are struggling to afford diapers. And that's actually the intent of the grant.
Right.
So it's a huge problem, and it's only something that I think will get worse as more and more health clinics close. I mean, the Planned Parenthood near my house closed, and I live in probably one of the most, liberal places in the country. So it's upsetting.
Yeah, no, and again, that's one of those things that I think unfortunately is getting lost, or left by the wayside with everything else going on. So I'm really glad that you brought that up and we can bring some attention to that. Um, accountability in the United States. I would say that the vast majority of the populace is thirsting for that. So thank you for being a part of an organization that is actually trying to bring accountability into this chaos. How would, um how would my community help you or help this effort?
Yeah, well, donations are always super welcome. You can go to our website, campaignforaccountability.org, and make a donation. You can sign up for our newsletter, and you can, follow us, and you can tweet about our stories, talk about them to your friends, because I agree, we're sort of in a crisis of accountability right now. And so I also call upon all of my brothers and my brethren in accountability in government agencies, especially in states, as we discussed, that might do something to go forth. I'm talking to you, attorneys general, state auditors, that sort of thing. And I really hope. I know we're all so busy, but it is super important.
It is. Ms. Kuppersmith, thank you for your time and what your organization is doing. I think it's critically important, and I appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.